All right. Yeah. So I took basically a single Greyhound from New York to Los Angeles, and along the way, sort of the problems with, at least with Greyhound, and having an effective intercity bus network sort of became the clearest they've ever been in my life. But something I thought would be fun, and Jeff, maybe you can help me arrange this, would be to go through the people who are here and introduce ourselves, talk about our experiences with long-distance transit thus far.
Do you want me to activate
the
Q&A session?
Should we do Q&A? And then anyone who...
But the Q&A makes it a little more ordered.
Yeah.
All right, we'll activate the Q&A.
So we'll do that.
One sec.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Bob.
Okay, because I couldn't hear you for a minute. So my intercity bus experience is pretty short distance. It's either both between Philadelphia and New York, and my most recent is a very impressive Flixbus between LA and Palm Springs. And I really think the future of the intercity bus industry is with those innovative carriers. They do everything right. The only thing they don't do right is, except in Boston, they don't really have access to terminals. If they can get to off-street terminals, particularly Flixbus, they've done everything right. New buses on time, reserved seats down to seat numbers, and I think we have to look to those carriers as our future.
Miles, tell me whenever you want me to go to the next person. I assume now. Antonio.
Hey, good morning, Miles. My name is Antonio Sinora, New York City Transit. My experience with intercity buses, the longest ride was New York City to Toronto, but I actually would love to hear more details regarding your trip from New York to LA, because I remember stumbling upon your Twitter thread regarding your cross-country adventure, and it was an adventure from the little bit I followed. So that's why I'm here, and love to hear all the inside crazy stories and sharing some of that experience that you had on that journey. Thank you for doing this session.
Miles texted me an important point, which was I activated Q&A, but I never unmuted him, which is kind of important. Now.
All right, so go again?
No, you're fine, but
okay.
He can hear you. He just can't speak back.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm trying to roll over. Thank you, Antonio.
No worries. But yeah, it seemed like quite the adventure. So there were quite a bit of delays along the way. You had some random red stops out in the middle of the country. The storytelling was actually quite riveting. So, yeah, if you can
we
share,
can definitely talk more about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we go after the introductions, yeah, I would love to hear more.
Sure. All right, next person.
Hi, this is Morgan. According to your little sheet here, yeah. So my name is Morgan Hunwin, student at Rutgers. My pronouns are she and they. it isn't quite like the longest bus ride in America, but when I was a sophomore in undergrad, I had $80 and I wanted to visit my friends in New Jersey. So I took a mix of intercity, local, and express buses to go from Murfreesboro, Tennessee to Newark, New Jersey, and it took 36 hours. It was it was quite an experience. Yeah. I had a lot of fun. The longest leg of it, there's a megabus that goes nonstop from Nashville to DC, and it goes direct from Nashville to DC. And,
seriously, nonstop, direct, okay.
Direct, yeah. No, it made plenty of stops, and like Knoxville. So like, and that was a decent time. I took Bolt Bus, Megabus, and Greyhound along with MTA carriers in Knoxville, Nashville, and New Jersey, obviously. It was a lot of fun. I got offered a lot of weed. I do not smoke weed, so it was quite an inconvenience. And there was this one instance where this guy was hitting on me, and I didn't want him to find out I was trans. But I mean, anyway, it was. I definitely. I didn't have a bad time. Would I do it again? Probably not. But it was interesting.
That seems reasonable. For what it's worth, the longest nonstop bus trip that I'm aware of is a Greyhound that goes from New York to Cleveland without stopping. There's like a scheduled rest stop in the middle, but there are no actual stops in between. And that just seems like a really long distance to go. All right, next person.
Sorry, one sec. I'm coordinating another room that is an issue now.
Oh, gotcha.
One sec.
I know anyone who's not Q&Ing is probably free to talk in the chat or to respond if you need to. Hello?
Hey, can people hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Miles. So
Hello.
I have to agree with the previous comment that was mentioned. I'm forgetting who it was about Flixbus being the future of intercity bus travel. When I first rode Flixbus from Philadelphia to Washington, I remember getting on, and the bus driver, who was a contracted carrier, which I think is like a really interesting business model, allows to not have all the fixed expenses and to be able to cut routes pretty easily. His app wasn't working for validation, so he called Flixbus's customer service to make sure that he could validate all the tickets, and they were really friendly, and they said, oh, actually, we don't really care if the tickets are validated. What we need you to do is we just need to make sure that all the passengers are on the right bus and that they're going to the right place. So don't worry about that aspect. So I just thought that meant so much because they didn't actually care if it was making money. They cared if the passengers were on the right bus or not. And that is just something that, like, none of the other carriers, Greyhound, Megabus, they actually charge you sometimes to speak to customer service, which I think is crazy. And it just shows how much the market is ripe for disruption. So
Definitely.
I think they're there at the right time. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Morgan has a good point about our bus too. I found that our bus tends to be a lot more limited in when they run and where they run, but they're definitely a good option too. But Flixbus has always surprised me at just how they have such good service, and they also run at like good times, and yeah, it just seems like a really good service.
Morgan, you're a former RBus employee, right? I guess we can't do the...
You can only communicate through chat, unfortunately.
Right, Morgan.
Hold on, I can one sec.
Morgan is right that RBus is also a great carrier.
But yeah.
Next person, Miles.
Yeah.
I think we're up to Amid, who is muted on your end, and I can't unmute you because you muted yourself.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuting myself.
You're fine.
Yeah, so I've taken a few buses a bunch of places. I've actually taken the Greyhound bus from New York to Cleveland on my way to Michigan for a music festival. The worst experience ever, actually. I like literally hitchhiked the ride back from somebody I made friends there. That's how terrible the experience was going there. But I was to speak on about no access to terminals because I went to a trip in DC and my phone broke. And I had taken the megabus down there, and I was like, okay, phone broke. I borrowed my friend's phone, got the ID number, and got to the bus station, and my hand had sweated off. You hadn't had paper or anything, so it was just like a weekend trip. And I was like, okay, I'll just go buy a ticket at the station. Because you can't really buy a ticket anywhere. There's like nowhere to actually buy a ticket. So I had to like go through this whole process. So I was just saying like it would be actually so much better because my only negative experience with the bus stations was the fact that there's no actual terminal. Yeah,
What carrier was that?
Megabus. I actually ended up taking a Greyhound from DC simply because of the fact that there was an actual person I can give cash or use my card. Because there was no way to, like, even, like, the person, because I found, like, one of the Megabus attendants or the bus attendants, they wouldn't allow me to actually do a transaction with them. They could only change a previous made thing or a previously done thing. So I had to go to, like, the Greyhound person, which I just luckily got the bus back.
Yeah, Megabus tends not to have real terminals. But I love your story about making friends due to the badness of the trip, because I feel like that always happens.
Well, it was so bad. Like, somebody threw up on the bus. Like, it was just terrible. Like,
gosh.
Like, it was like broken. There was like it was just like if you could like think of like just like a ratchet like YouTube like every bad bus series. It was literally bad. Like every time we stopped, like it was just terrible.
We might be able to carry this entire session based on people telling bad stories of bad bus experiences. Which speaks to the brokenness of the whole system. All right, should we go to the next person?
Yep, one sec.
Hello. Oh, it's me, right? Okay. So, my name is James Breen, longtime Miles fan. Repping the T-shirt right now. And, I mean, a story that this all made me think of has to do with train service as opposed to bus service, really, in the long distance. But I've never... Am I buffering right now?
Yeah.
I've never been on a long-distance service. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine.
I hope so. I've never been on a long-distance train or bus in North America that's not been late by at least like half an hour, probably. I think it's buffering.
I think you might be a little behind, but we're getting everything.
Oh, okay, good. So we're all used to things being late all the time, obviously, when we take these long-distance trips. But it was just so funny on one of my first times ever taking a long-distance train service in Austria when we started running. I think we were about 12 minutes behind, and the conductor went extremely apologetically over the microphone to say, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry and ashamed that we are 12 minutes behind, and we will do everything we can to make up time." And then we actually made up time, and we're only 8 minutes late. It's just, that attitude is amazing. I've never seen anything like that. Also, and then the last thing I'll just say about bus service is that, I mean, I've taken the New York to Boston Greyhounds and Peter Pans plenty of times, and has anyone else ever had the really crazy Greyhound driver who, like, does an unscheduled rest stop between New York and Boston and then virulently chastises anyone who's late getting back to the bus from his unscheduled rest stop? And then goes on about it for, like, 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's a common thing. And, like, I mean, it's tough, right? Because obviously, a driver would have to use the bathroom or possibly, the driver might have to use the bathroom, so it might just be worth it to just put a scheduled rest stop in between. I'm not sure, but rest stops are a really interesting dynamic of intercity bus, and I'd certainly be curious to know how other places do it, because Greyhound likes to just kind of just pull out randomly and just decide to stop for an hour, and that's just sort of what happens. Like especially on the long distance journey, we would stop somewhere and extend what was a scheduled 15-minute stop into like a 35-minute stop for seemingly no reason. So it's an interesting dynamic. Next person.
Yeah. So domestically, my longest intercity bus ride is probably like Indianapolis to Chicago, which isn't that long. They do sometimes have a rest stop in that one, which is intriguing. And that was a Megabus. I've used Megabus a lot. Very little exposure to Greyhound. Come on, crazy drivers. I have had, or bus drivers doing ad hoc behavior. I have had some that I was seriously concerned about their way, like that they're handling traffic, you know, where it's like they're aggressively driving, like they're driving like a Civic, and it's like, no, we're driving like 5 Civics.
Yeah.
You're taking people out.
Definitely.
So interestingly, so my longest rides have been abroad and in places like Uganda and Haiti, and those experiences make sometimes Greyhound feel like a dream, if we're honest. So, like,
I can imagine.
I had one bus ride where all the windows were not present. Like, there had been previous accident, and they just covered it up with plastic, and they're like, here you go, good luck. And you're like, oh.
Wow.
Okay, you know.
Yeah, that sounds like a trip, man. Jeez. All right, next. Sorry for being so flippant about it. I feel like I'm like it's like a conveyor belt with people. I just don't know how else to announce the next person.
Yeah, no, it's Chris. We're kind of in commiseration mode. There was a time when, not too long ago, so I live in Pittsburgh, and we really have, Flix just sort of showed up with like a lot of these. They just show up with like one route once a day and expect that to actually carry them to prove why they should be here. But at any rate, I decided to take Greyhound to see a friend in Cincinnati for the weekend. And actually heading that way, it worked out pretty well. You have to connect in Columbus with that crazy LA route I think you were mentioning, Miles.
Yeah.
And that worked okay going out. Coming back, on the other hand, we got the note that the bus leaving Cincy was running late, and the bus coming to Columbus was on time. So my buddy, we loaded up in the car, and on the day of the worst snowstorm that they had that year, hightailed it to Columbus, to where I waited for 4.5 hours for the Los Angeles bus to show up. But the other thing, speaking of the stops, is there's a and I think it's in Steubenville or something like that, tiny little town between Pittsburgh and Columbus. The bus pulls over. There's like an urban bus stop booth there. It actually says Greyhound property on it, and you sit there for 5 minutes. The driver doesn't even leave the seat; he just sits there, and then gets back on the highway. I really don't know what that's all about, but. Honestly, I think if we're going to, I wish that buses were at least taken a little bit more seriously, because the only convenient travel for buses between here and anywhere east is Harrisburg or Philadelphia. And even like to D.C., it's like this megabus goes down to Morgantown, West Virginia, Greyhound goes to Baltimore and then down. And I'm not sure anybody from Pittsburgh is getting off in Baltimore. So that's my rant.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think when it comes to Steubenville, I think that's just the kind of thing where the bus is scheduled to stop there, but they don't have like a real stop, so they'll just like wonder if anyone's going to get on and just sit there for a little bit and then leave again. That happened to me when I was we stopped in Wheeling in that same way, Wheeling, West Virginia, going between this was on a separate trip between like Pittsburgh and Columbus, but it was sort of a similar situation.
Yeah, that's another one. And I'm just kind of tired of Megabus really just being a college bus at this point. It's not exactly for those who are trying to get somewhere in any expedient manner. But
I know that on the long distance trip, we would make stops in like, tiny little places in like Utah, and they would basically just be rest stops, like bona fide rest stops, because no one was getting on, but it would always be at some gas station, so the driver would be like, all right, go get a snack, whatever.
Yeah.
Good points in the chat about the possibility of having just a little kiosk or something. But
there should be a way for them. I see this can't skip stops. Like, there should be a way for the drivers to know whether or not there's someone at the next stop, especially with if it's en route. Like, if you're on Megabus and it drops down to Morgantown, you kind of have to go no matter what. But there has to be a way to manage that. If you can show me where the bus is on your map, you should be able to know whether or not someone's there with a ticket, I feel.
Yeah, because tickets should probably be bought in advance anyway for a long-distance trip.
Right, especially where you don't have an actual station.
Yeah. All right, next person.
Hi, my name is Carl, and listening to this conversation has gotten me thinking about, I think one of the reasons the intercity bus service is such a mess here compared to other places might be that the government transit entities are very lightly, if at all, involved in the intercity bus service. It's not even, I mean, they're obviously not the providers, but they're not even involved in the funding or the setting of routes, or about all they do is license the stops. They tell the buses where they can and can't stop. It's about the extent of government involvement in Greyhound and Megabus and FlexBus and all these other things. So we have these, regional transit authorities or even state transit authorities that aren't involved in the intercity bus service, excluding places like New Jersey, where NJ Transit is statewide bus service. But I feel like a lot of the issues that I've encountered, I've ridden Greyhound as far as from Philadelphia to Kentucky, which is 18 hours if everything goes properly. When it doesn't, it's way more. And a lot of the issues I've come across of like buses, a lot of the operational issues that are talked about are just schedules not matching up or service city pairs being random and not useful. Could be mitigated with more involvement by public entities.
Yeah, that's something that I know that I remember at the end of the LA trip, I posted on Twitter something about what does everyone think about how to fix this? And a lot of people said that involving the government more could be a good way to make the routes make more sense, hopefully, and perhaps, subsidize better service. Okay, next person.
I just have a comment. I'm Bob Newhauser from Brooklyn. I did speak before. I just wanted to say the last person who said about more government involvement, I think he's totally on point. As I said, one of the problems with the non-Greyhound and Peter Pan carriers is that they don't get into terminals. But I think in two cities they got into terminals because the local governments set space aside and ordered them in, and that was in Boston, where the buses terminated at South Station with great connections to the train, and then the same thing in Washington, D.C., and while being in a parking lot, in a parking structure is not the greatest, the parking structure is right next to Union Station. I think those are two examples where the local government did get involved, and I think it's an improvement over waiting on the street for your bus.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all about the multimodality. I mean, you have really interesting situations where Greyhound will own a station that's nowhere near anything, but the station itself is great infrastructure. So I've never been to it, but I believe the Cincinnati station is just kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like it's somewhat close to downtown, but it's not close enough that it's walkable, really, or at least like a nice walk. So that's a really good point about trying to create these multimodal centers. But yeah, okay. Next person. Also, Dayton's another one. The Dayton stop is really far from Dayton. Oh, actually, Carl says that the Cincinnati one is walkable. It's just not a great walk.
Yeah. My name's Andrew Jennings. I'm a retired transportation consultant, and I generally use buses only when there are no other alternatives. And probably my most interesting time was when I was at the Phoenix airport going up to northern Arizona, and the bus never appeared. It just kept stopped. And absolutely no response from Greyhound as to why, or apology, or anything like that at the time. But I think if you look behind the numbers, there is a lot more government involvement in intercity bus service than you are. There's fundings that go out to the state, and I know that Massachusetts, for example, provides funds for many of the intercity carriers that are operating with in-state. And I think the funds are provided mainly through the provision of buses. I wish that they were more transparent on how this funding worked, because the network of bus routes that we see doesn't fit my needs living north of Boston. Also, for those of you who are interested, the Chaddock Institute has published for the last few years an update as to what's happening in the intercity bus industry that's quite informative, where services are being added, what types of services are changing. I recommend anyone interested take a look at that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree that I wish there was, I mean, yeah, because you're probably right that, because I know that Greyhound has services that are, it's called Greyhound Connect, and it's like sort of these rural services that are almost certainly subsidized, I think, that just kind of go to small rural towns on local roads. And yeah, it'd be nice if there was more transparency in the process of how the routes are decided. Also, speaking of transparency, Ray makes up an interesting point in the comments of how the heck how do the gas station stops work? Like, how do they decide which places they stop? It all seems a little bit of a mystery. So that's a really good point. Okay, and then Jared says that a lot of intercity Greyhound service is subsidized by the FTA. All right, should we go to the next person?
Hi, I'm Dan Solomon from Boston. This is Sylvie. To comment on government involvement and getting buses into terminals, I feel like that kind of is a blessing, because from what I've seen in Boston and New York, there's a lot of political push against buses, very little advocacy for them. And so there's a lot of people, like business owners in the neighborhoods where buses stop, that say to their local politicians, get these buses out of the neighborhood. And cities have done a lot to do that. Like Boston said, no buses can stop on the street, you have to stop in the terminal. Terminal's kind of full, so that's kind of putting a limit on entrepreneurship and an expansion of service where the demand is clearly there. So in New York, there is something similar where the state got involved and said that every particular physical bus that might stop at a curbside stop needs to have a piece of paper in the window from the city, which means that some of the curbside carriers can't wet lease buses and boost service on holiday weekends and things like they used to, and now they're just sold out and you can't get on a bus anymore when you used to on a Sunday afternoon. So I think that it would be good if there was like an organization like a National Association of Bus Passengers who would push back against things and say, well, we want more side service. We want to make it possible for service to expand where the demand is there.
That is.
Make a comment that we have about 10 minutes left in the session.
Oh, that flew by. Oh, did we? Is that because we started late?
Even with the extension of it, no.
Oh wow. Okay. But first of all, Dan, that's a great point about having more political representation for bus riders. Like it really does feel like like bus riders just don't have any representation anywhere, and I feel like it's just oftentimes treated as sort of last resort. Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, let's just.
Hold on, now everyone's muted. Kurt, can you hang on a second? Kurt was helping me out by managing the Q&A. Let's just put it on non-Q&A.
Yeah, we could just do an open conversation at this point. I mean, we only have so much time left. It might be a more efficient way to talk about everything.
Yeah, and everyone can unmute themselves when they want to speak.
Yeah. But yeah, no, political representation for bus riders is so important because right now you really do feel like you feel treated like dirt when you're on the bus. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience. But yeah, anyone who wants to talk, go ahead.
So, if nobody doesn't mind, I can respond to that last comment about getting buses in terminals. So part of, I'll say as much as I can, given my NDA and everything, but part of my job at Airbus was coming up with new stops for the system. And we did a lot of work with like cities and agencies to try and hammer out curbside stops because of, given our business model, getting a terminal just actually wasn't that great. We're actually doing, they're really doing a lot of work right now in New York to try and get more spots in the Port Authority bus terminal. Outside of rush hour, there are spots available, but between like 5 and 10 and like 4 and 8, it's completely full. And the irony is that the Port Authority is basically begging people to use the Washington Bridge bus terminal because there's tons of spots. But because the Port Authority is so much more like better connected, that's where all the demand is. And when we were looking into like starting service into Boston, we ended up taking like a bus stop in Spanish Harlem, and we went through a pretty I wouldn't call them hostile per se, but a pretty concerned community board in Manhattan. And a lot of their concerns weren't necessarily about buses, but were greater things as opposed, like they were more talking about like pollution and like traffic and things that really our bus wouldn't, no pun intended, our bus wouldn't have like, you know, contributed towards in a substantial manner, but a lot of general concerns about the quality of life in the neighborhood. And it was interesting, I think, to hear like from the residents talk about, you know, their concerns about, you know, having more buses in their neighborhood. We did end up getting the stop after someone brought up the point that like it's just one bus twice a day. It's not going to add another 10,000 cars to the neighborhood. But it was an interesting perspective that I had never really like thought of before.
Yeah. What neighborhood did you say this was in?
Spanish Harlem. It may be
gotcha.
Like East Harlem on the Google map. I don't really know what its official name is. I know everyone's called Spanish Harlem.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, as terminals get filled up, you have to improvise. Like, I know with our bus, I've only taken 1 hour bus trip, but it was from Philadelphia to Baltimore, and it's the stop. This is the same with Megabus. The stop isn't actually in Baltimore; it's in White Marsh. I doing the trip on a Sunday night, and I had to wait for 40 minutes in White Marsh just to get the local bus into the city, which definitely wasn't optimal. But it I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting argument, right? Because maybe that's just what you have to do if terminals are busy. Like, if you can provide more service, is it better to have a stop way outside of the downtown if you can provide better service?
Okay, what I wanted to say, I think some of the reasons that some of the terminals are far out from the city center is that the stop isn't central to the route. So I go back to this Flixbus example. When I went from LA to Palm Springs, the bus was actually headed to Phoenix and Tucson, and the way the interstates are set up, the way for the bus to get into the city, it has to make it almost a 6 to 8 mile detour down and back. And they basically stop at a gas station area where there's a gas station and a restaurant. And I think Greyhound uses it too. They just make it clear to passengers, this is where we let off. This would be a case where in the future public transit operations in those cities could better connect to the intercity buses. It wouldn't be so bad. But it's not always a sinister reason. They just lose a lot of time going into every smaller city center if they're trying to go, say, from LA to Phoenix or Tucson, which is a long trip.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Especially when you're dealing with smaller towns. But I feel like personally, with a city like Baltimore, you probably would want to get as close to downtown as possible. Although it really doesn't have any stops downtown anyway. Like, the Greyhound stop for Baltimore is called Baltimore Downtown, but it's like a 40-minute walk from downtown. So it's really not optimal. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing where, like, maybe my Baltimore map is wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, it wouldn't be that big of a detour to go properly downtown. I mean, the original plan was to build a bus stop downtown, and then people downtown protested, which goes back. But I think Dan was saying about just political, like, we don't want the bus. People are sending stuff in the chat. You feel free to unmute yourselves too if you want to just talk. But yeah, no, Kevin makes a point about White Marsh, how it's just kind of out there, and like the highway serves downtown anyway. And let's see, Chris says that, oh, I see, okay. So Megabus doesn't want to pay to use a proper terminal.
Yeah.
Which is definitely a classic with sort of the low-cost carriers like that.
The funny thing about that is, at the same time, whenever someone tried to make them pay, they threatened to leave downtown, and our local government people freaked out. No, please stay. And so they just kind of let them just pick up on a curb free by the convention center. It's ridiculous sometimes. Wow.
No, yeah, I mean, even in New York, I know the Megabus stop is, when you're coming into New York, it's actually relatively convenient because you're on like 7th Ave. But when you're getting a Megabus away from New York, you have to board in Hudson Yards. It's just the most inconvenient place in Midtown to board. And I think, part of it is the Port Authority being over capacity, and part of it is probably not wanting to pay to have a real terminal. We can't hear you, Sonny. Are you muted?
It looks like he's unmuted now, but I have to share the unfortunate news that it's on 11:25, which is the end of this session. So Miles, I'll give you a chance to wrap up, and then I'll give the spiel about the next session.
All right. Well, I guess, okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Sorry this was a little weird, and definitely would have worked better in real life, but I'm glad that everyone stuck around for it. I think we had some really interesting conversations, and I put some links in the chat if you want more about my trip, because I know that we didn't really get to talk about that. But yeah, thanks for coming, and have a great rest of the day.